The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good day, everybody, and welcome to our webinar. Topic for today is production switches. As hopefully most of you know, production switches are the pride and joy of Ross Video. We started our first production switcher developments 44 years ago, and they're still very much part of our culture. So this particular webinar is the first in a series of 4 that we intend to broadcast this year. Hopefully we're going to be able to provide you with some helpful information that will aid you in your productions and your production decisions going forward. Just a note that our next webinar in April, which will be post NAB, we're going to be discussing more in-depth subjects such as IP connectivity, SDI at 12 gig, and hybrid production, as well as UHD production tools. And of course, we'll be giving you an NAB highlight for those of you that weren't able to visit us at the upcoming show. Today, there's actually myself, Nigel Spratling, and my colleague here, Les O'Reilly. And Les is sitting here poised to answer questions on the keyboard. So as we go through the presentation, please feel free to type your questions into the chat window, and Les is going to do his best to answer them as they come in. And of course, we'll have a question and answer session, time permitting, at the end of this session. So as far as the agenda is concerned, this is really going to be an overview of production switches that are provided by Ross, as well as the overall solutions and how we can help you face today's technical challenges going forward. Excuse me. We're not going to get really deep into any of the specific products. Most of the information that we're going to talk about is also available, of course, directly on the website. So first of all, we're going to just chat generally about what are the challenges we're all going to face if we're not facing already, both operational and technical. Then we'll look at the switcher line. We have a very full switcher line, as many of you may be aware, and which switches are right for you. Might be a surprise introduction in there as well. And then we're going to look at how we leverage the integration of all the various control methods to allow for much more efficient workflows and perhaps remote production. So right away, all of us face the challenge of being able to do more with less equipment, perhaps less expense, maybe less staff, depending on the application. So, and that's not just for our industry. I think everybody faces this challenge today. So one of the things we all have to be able to do going forward is to produce in any format. We all know the dynamics of our industry today. We have to accommodate lots of different formats. We need to increase our operational efficiency, and that often means taking another look at how our operations actually work. And of course, we all want to reduce operating costs and maximize our equipment life. We don't want to buy a product today that has a limited lifetime. And therefore, of course, in doing so, if we can keep the maximum life, we are also maximizing our return on investment. So let's take a quick look at some format issues. Obviously, we need to produce in the formats we understand today. Standard definition. Standard definition, while much of the world is now producing in high definition, a huge portion is still standard definition, and we have to support that. Obviously, we have the high definition formats, and of course now UHD formats of various types. We also need to be able to output our productions to multiple destination formats, sometimes simultaneously. So that's a desire going forward that we need to address. At the same time, we need to minimize any latency that occurs because of conversions and so on, and minimize A/B timing errors. The other part of increasing operational efficiency is to simplify workflows. We need to be able to consolidate our controls and the tasks, and perhaps even automate. Automate may be the wrong word. Simplify complex tasks, make perhaps single operator functions instead of having to involve multiple operators for certain types of tasks. And of course, we want to reduce our operating costs. So ideally, in today's environment, we really want to size the production team, the staff, to the task and not to the equipment. And when you think about that, you know, a traditional production system, a traditional control room has very specific products, production switcher, graphics systems, audio, etc., and an operator for each of those stations. And sometimes the task or the program you're producing doesn't require a whole a gallery full of people. So the idea is to be able to find a way to minimize the team required so that it's scaled to meet the production task. To do that, we have to obviously minimize the system complexity and simplify overall operations. So as far as maximizing equipment life, whatever equipment is used today, it needs to be very flexible. We need to be able to have the flexibility to produce in various formats and be able to connect to lots of different connectivity schemes. And of course, hopefully we're prepared for future schemes as they emerge. So on the technical challenges side, many of you on the call will be very familiar with what we're facing today as far as picture formats are concerned. Obviously, we've lived with standard definition for many years. High definition is now commonplace, and most of you are probably already producing in a high definition, and some of you may well be already adopting some 4K productions. In order to make our equipment and our workflows simple, we really need to be able to accommodate all of these formats, perhaps simultaneously. So just a quick note, I'm not going to go through this slide in detail. I just wanted to point out something here, which some of you are probably very much aware of, but when we're talking about the new formats and the higher resolution formats, the data rates look kind of interesting, perhaps even scary in some cases. So of course, standard HD that we're used to, 1080i, is 1.5 gigabits. You're all familiar with that. 1080p is 3 gigabits. And then when we get into the higher resolution data rates, I mean, you're looking at 12 gigabits for full television standard of UHD TV at 60 or, sorry, these are integer numbers. That we also are really talking about the non-integer frame rates, 5994, etc. And if you look at 8K, which of course is in discussion, and we know that you know, specifically in Japan, they're going to be doing 8K productions, and Korea's looking at the same thing. You're looking at baseband data rates of potentially 48 gigabits a second. So compared to where we're at today, extremely high data rates for baseband video. So I just wanted to point that out to you. Another thing that we're all talking about in the industry, many of you may already be looking very seriously at this if you're not using it, is the conversion, if conversion is the right word, or the adoption of high dynamic range. So just a note here, you know, we're all used to standard dynamic range. We've only recently given it a name, but our dynamic range for normal production is being based on 60 or 70-year-old CRT technology, where the range available on a CRT was limited. All of our modern displays are capable of much greater dynamic range, and so new standards exist to be able to produce with up to 100 times the range of what we call standard dynamic range today. And there are several types of HDR formats that we can adopt, and there are pros and cons. Just again, I'm not going to bore you with the real details. We can discuss this later, and if you've got questions, we'll be happy to answer them. So as far as formats are concerned, there is a professional standard called SMPTE 2084, 2084 is also referred to as PQ, or perceptual quantization. And then there's an equivalent consumer standard, which is the CTA 861. And those two give us a very wide, very high dynamic range for our luma values. The issue with that particular standard is that it's incompatible with standard dynamic range displays. And so if you adopt that particular format, then it means for delivery, you really need to perhaps deliver two versions, which could be quite expensive. Whereas there are other versions of HDR, HLG, hybrid log gamma, that was a development between the BBC and NHK, which is actually compatible with standard dynamic range. And something that many people are unfamiliar with, because originally when we started talking as an industry about HDR, it was always associated with UHD. Well, it's not. It can work perfectly well in HD formats as well. And it's potentially very appealing because the cost of entry to put HDR in an HD production is actually really only the cost of using the right capture equipment. So as I mentioned, it's about 100, or the potential is for 100 times the brightness range of SDR. And just a quick comparison there, SDR is equivalent to, those people that are familiar with stops, 7 to 9 stops, whereas HDR goes 12 to 14 stops. So, you know, almost twice as much range there. So I should also note that there are actually quite a number of non-standard HDR formats. For example, S-Log, S-Log3, and from our friends that begin with S. And there's other formats as well, particularly in the cinema world. But here we're talking about video production. So then when we look at connectivity, and I'm sorry, I'm going very fast through these things because I really want to get through a lot of this information as quickly as we can. But all of these different formats that we're talking about do require that we look seriously at what our infrastructure is going to need to be able to make our production system work properly and cost effectively. So if you're upgrading an existing system, obviously, you know, we're going to need to do an audit. You're going to need to do an audit of how your connectivity scheme is working today and what it's going to be capable of moving forward. Everywhere where we're talking about conversion between formats, there's the potential for increased latency and AV timing errors. And so it's hard to look at this and say, well, how do we do this flexibly to allow all the various signal connectivity schemes? And types of connectivity, well, of course, in baseband digital video, we've got our SDI formats, 270 megabits up to 12 gigabits for UHD. And on the IP side, there are several choices there, some really just coming to the forefront now. Of course, we've seen NDI, which is a compressed IP transport scheme that's becoming quite popular. Then there's the uncompressed standards, which are available over IP as well. And of course, the AIMS compliant SMPTE 2110, which is now the standardized IP production format recognized by SMPTE and many of the other organizations. And of course, some of you may be familiar with ASPEN. ASPEN's originally from Evertz. It's probably the most widely adopted IP connection scheme to date. Although now that we have adopted 2110, it's probably going to change over time. Just a note here, our next session, next webinar, we're going to go into much greater depth on IP schemes and UHD formats. So here it's just to give you some of the jargon. So how do we design switches to address all of these things? And as far as picture formats are concerned, all of our switches, regardless of the size, include these days internal frame sinks and format conversion resources so that we can do an awful lot of those conversions directly inside the switcher and have full control over the timing of those conversions so that we can minimize latency. Also, all of our switches, certainly the mid-size and large-scale switches, offer native UHD. So from a a future-proofness, or even if you're adopting those standards today, we can do it today right out of the gate. As far as connectivity schemes are concerned, of course, we address SD and HD. All of our switches also handle 3 gig 1080p inputs, and several of our switches on the mid-size and large size actually allow hybrid interconnect for 3 gig and 12 gig UHD solutions, 3 gig being quad link, of course. We also have solutions for IP, so we do have AIMS compliant IP interfaces, as well as we have ASPEN input and output cards for our large switches. So let's just take an overview of the entire switcher line. And our switcher line is very broad. Many of you are very aware of it, but some of you may not be. So we start from a very small switcher called the Carbonite Black Solo, which is we're going to talk about in a moment. Then we have what we call a graphite, which is in the middle there. It's a all-in-one system, and I will explain that further as well. And then we have the Carbonite series, so Carbonite and Carbonite Black, which has been a successful production switcher. Thousands and thousands of them are in use today. And of course, at the top end, we have our flagship product line, the Acuity, which is very configurable and very capable product in use all over the world. So let me dive into this a little bit further. So the smallest end of the production switcher scale is the Carbonite Black Solo. This was introduced a couple of years ago, nearly. Carbonite Black Solo is a very competent small switcher. It's available as either a fully integrated system with panel and electronics, and it's also available as a separate rack frame with a separate control panel, or indeed you can buy the 1RU frame and just simply use the virtual panel that comes with it in our dashboard control system. So the Carbonite Solo, when it was introduced, was actually received very, very well. But we received almost immediately a number of questions from our customers saying, you know, we love this new small switcher. It works exactly like its big brothers in the Carbonite family, so we can use it easily. The problem is that the inputs are just not quite enough for our task. So the actual I/O format on the Solo is it's got 9 inputs. Three of those are HDMI and 6 of them are SDI. And many of our customers said, we'd love to use this product, but we really need probably 8 SDI inputs. And so here on this webinar, we're a sneak peek. We're introducing the Solo 13. This is exactly the same product in terms of features and functionality, but we will be introducing this properly at NAB. This is a 13 input switcher. Same outputs. It's 1 HDMI input and 12 SDI inputs. So I think this will be a very attractive product given the feedback we've received from our customers. And that product is going to be shipping in April. And so we have the integrated version is $9,500 and the 1 rack unit frame is $6,000. So very reasonably priced given the horsepower that exists within this small product. It may be small, but it's certainly not small on features. It has all of the same features as our larger Carbonite family, just a reduced set of them. So let's take a quick look at the overall Carbonite range, the Carbonite family in general. So it starts, of course, with the one we've just talked about, the Solo. And then we move into the, step up a size, and we're into the Carbonite family. Carbonite is, was the original production switcher, mid-size that we introduced, incredibly popular. That particular switcher is capable of 1, 2, or 2.5 MEs with 18 inputs, 18 to 24 inputs and 10 outputs. And then we introduced a bigger version of the Carbonite Black frame. That's 2 or 3 MEs, and it's fixed at 36 inputs and 22 outputs. And then by popular demand, we added the Carbonite Black Plus, and last year the Black Plus with 12 gig. So those are again 2 or 3 ME switches, 36 inputs, additional 3 outputs because we also added some dedicated multi-viewers. So there's actually 5 multi-viewers in those 2 frames, and there are 3 additional outputs which are dedicated to multi-viewers. Those are the frames. As far as the control for the Carbonites are concerned, and it doesn't matter which of the Carbonites we're talking about, there's a choice of panels. There are 7 panel choices, which is a very wide range for anybody's switches in this group. And also we have full control via our free dashboard software, which you can download, and that runs, of course, on Mac, PC, and Linux. And then we also have our view control, which is built into every version of Carbonite, and that is a fully touch screen interface that you can use to allow single operator control of both all of the switcher functions as well as the external devices such as expression graphics and service channels and so on. So very, very comprehensive control, and view control was designed to simplify fairly complex productions and allow single operator use. So just a note on the family itself. There are more than 6,000 of these things in use today. They're all over the world, which means there is a huge operator base. Of course, they're in everything. They're in flight packs, trucks, studios, cutting rooms, house of worship, you name it, there's a Carbonite there. They are also, we've learned, compared to lots of other products out there, super easy to learn and to operate. The other thing that's been very unique with Carbonite, and I think it's why many of you that are online may already be Carbonite users, hopefully you will all agree, the Carbonite itself, one of the strengths that we've brought to it and that we provided for our customers is the fact that the Carbonite has grown new features with every release. And even somebody that perhaps bought serial number 1 when we first released Carbonite can have every feature that's been released since. And it's just a free download from our website. So, and there's been some remarkable features added to it since we first introduced the product. It is the standard that others follow. We did set the stage for, or really change the scene for what was a mid-size switcher when we introduced Carbonite. And now we're seeing that most of the other manufacturers of this kind of equipment is really following Carbonite and you know, trying to emulate the things we can do. Naturally, with that many in use, people have already are accustomed to the bulletproof reliability of the product. And I just want to point out just a couple of things about Carbonite family, a couple of the unique things, because these are things which, if you're not familiar with them, they are incredibly powerful and something that really you can't do in any other way without adding a lot of complexity. So mini-me's. So mini-me's, what are mini-me's? Obviously they're small MEs, but these are resources which float inside the Carbonite itself and can be positioned anywhere in the signal flow. So a mini-me is actually a very simple layering device. It has you can dissolve within it to program preview, and you have a couple of key channels. And so it allows us to build things that you might use regularly in your production. For example, if you've got perhaps an input that you want to brand, you could build that in a mini-me, and then the operator simply has to select that input and it's pre-branded for them. Doesn't absorb any of the ME features. At the same time, maybe you've got a virtual set or a green screen with weather, and you want to just pre-build that and not occupy any space on an ME. That you can do with a mini-me right the way up front. Maybe I'm going to do an interview with perhaps 4 people. I need a 4-box shot. I'm going to build my DVE 4 boxes on an ME, and then I could actually feed that ME into a mini-me to add the graphics branding for it. And again, not occupy another ME. and allow myself room for other transitions. Or alternatively, I can just position mini-me's all the way downstream and do multi-channel output with different branding on those output channels. So very flexible and very easy to use and very powerful. It really expands on the capabilities of your production. Another unique feature that came along with mini-me's is the ability to manage multiple screens and scale across various screen images. So, for example, we can scale across up to 4 tiles in any layout. And for events, perhaps where you have projection systems, we can actually do edge blending, scaling, keying, and bezel compensation if they're displays rather than projectors, and all that's available as standard within the Carbonite family. So very powerful and very unique to this product. Another thing that's unique, not the switcher itself, but every Carbonite these days includes our high-end expression graphics system as a software-only version. So this is a piece of software that you load onto a Windows PC or laptop with an NVIDIA card, and now I can actually take advantage of those high-end graphics you see in every kind of production these days, and include them in my production, of course, straight from the media stores within the switcher. And the way it works is actually quite simple. The output is simply connected to the switcher via Ethernet, and then the graphics are rendered directly into the media stores of the production switcher for use in your production. Now, the downside of this free version is that I can only output stills because the render's not in real time across Ethernet. I can't do animations that way. However, I can build animations and pre-render them and output them, and also transfer them into the media stores if I wanted to do animated graphics. So it's very powerful indeed, allows you to build some very, very good looking productions, and that's included with every version of Carbonite. So that's a very powerful feature indeed. So, and of course, we talked earlier about being future-proof. So every Carbonite includes format conversion. The Carbonite black versions all are true UHD switches. They're not resource limited, and the ganging is under the hood. So what we end up with is actually the way we've built Carbonite. When you turn it into a UHD switcher, it's not a ganging system. It's actually a true UHD switcher underneath. And the resources that you get inside Carbonite for UHD are far beyond anything else that prefers to or proffers to be able to do UHD. So there's actually a full ME with 4 keys and a media channel keyer. There's a couple of channels of key fill media store. There's 2 DVEs, and of course there's multi-use. So it's very powerful in UHD. We also have a version that can offer you 12 gig connectivity as well as IP connectivity. So we're meeting all those things. One thing I will say, so I've got an apology to make for those of you that have been following along with us over the years. At NAB last year, we introduced something which we classified as a technology introduction for the Solo platform, and that was the media clip player. And we announced it at NAB, and we said that it would be coming in 2017. It didn't arrive in 2017, so we're very sorry about that. It is still coming. We faced a few technical challenges that we, what should we say, were a little optimistic about in the beginning. We now have a really good handle on that. This will be appearing in both versions, in all the versions of Solo. It's currently scheduled for version 2.0 of Solo, which will be out sometime after NAB. So it is still coming. And for those of you that are waiting for it, I do apologize, but hopefully your patience will pay off and you'll have a very capable little media player to include in your playback in your productions. So all-in-one graphites. So we introduced this at NAB last year. This has really been a game changer for a lot of people. There are plenty of people that wanted, that like the idea of having an all-in-one production system, something that can accommodate both the actual production switcher part, graphics, clip play back or server channels, and audio. And so Graphite does all of that. It is a full Carbonite under the hood. We actually built the hardware of a Carbonite on a PCIe card so that we could just install it in a server. And the server itself contains our Expression graphics system, which, as you probably are aware, is an award-winning product these days and in use by really top-end broadcasters, as well as everybody else below, and for live events and sports stadiums. It's a very, very powerful full 3D layering graphics engine. So that's built into this product. We have, as standard, 2 channels of clip servers, which can be expanded. We also have now, we've expanded this since NAB, a 48-channel audio mixer, and you can put these breakout boxes on it to do microphones and IFB and mix minus and so on for your talent. And we've now added the ability to put 3 of those boxes on there. And so you can effectively use them as stage boxes. So very powerful. On its own, it's a really remarkable product, but we realized that for many people, they want something they can use right out of the box. And graphics development can often be, you know, quite a lengthy process. So we got together with our friends in our rocket surgery division, Ross Creative Services, and they have built for you 6 full motion graphics packages, which are fully editable. You can modify them for your task, and we have news packages and sports packages for various sports programs. And so, you know, there's a lot of different pieces to the graphics system, but they're all usable right out the gate. You can use data link and other things on them and just edit the graphics to suit your needs, replace the logos, the color schemes, everything else, and you will be ready to go. So those are very powerful packages, and they're included with Graphite. Recently, we just announced the addition of being able to include a Graphite with our Overdrive automated production control system. So that's something we will be highlighting at NAB, and that's a very powerful development indeed, because for smaller news production, smaller stations, they will be able to do full automated production with Graphite and Overdrive at a very reasonable price. If we take just step over to the large switches, Acuity, our flagship, it's a thing of beauty. We all love it here. Hopefully you do too. Acuity touches an awful lot of points. It's a very flexible system. It allows us to, you know, includes UHD and a number of other things, and there are really 2 physical versions of it. There's a 4RU frame that's capable of 60 by 40, and then there's an 8RU frame that's 120 by 60. The smaller frame can do up to 6 MEs, and a larger frame up to 8 MEs. So it's and actually it's very compact. So what that really means is it's in a mobile application, for example, in a sports truck, space is always at a premium. And so this is the Acuity mainframe has an awful lot of processing power packed into a space that's probably half of that you require from anybody else's product. As I mentioned, we've got flexible ME configuration. You can have up to 8 MEs. The other thing that's very, very different with Acuity is its ability to do monitoring. So we have an enormous monitoring capability within Acuity. You can have a lot of multi-viewers and eliminate the need for your external multi-viewing systems. Maybe you still have some, of course, but you can minimize that, which also means we're minimizing cabling, routing, distribution systems, and all of those things. So very, very powerful indeed. Also, another feature with Acuity that's very powerful is the ability to assign what we call aux mixers and aux keyers to individual outputs, and that then allows us to do secondary production for either multi-channel outputs and perhaps even on-screen, on-set stuff. And that's just a standard feature of Acuity. You can turn them on and off as you require them. We also, because of our history with automated production, we have a vast library of third-party control systems, and so we can control pretty much anything in your production system right from Acuity, and then we layer onto that our other control interfaces, and you can build a very much a good control workflow, and particularly, of course, with our newsroom systems and Overdrive. It's totally HDR capable, so we actually have the ability to do HDR or SDR conversions as well as wide color gamut. The MEs in Acuity are unique because we have something we call multi-feed, which provides 8 configurable ME outputs per ME, and those are very flexible. Assign whichever keyers you want to whichever outputs, and this certainly users of this product all have remarked on the simplicity and power of the way these feeds operate. So of course we can do split MEs in this particular configuration. We have program A/B on it, but plus any combination of keyers on any of those outputs. So very powerful. And we also include a massive number. Les likes to use this number. It's an odd number, but I believe it's 2,304 custom control macro timelines. That's a lot. I always laugh when we see this number simply because it seems like nobody could ever use that number. But in fact, many people just simply retain the customs they've built so that they can do, their very cool effects and recall them at will for all their various productions. So a very cool feature. Acuity has a wide range of panels. There's the standard panels, there are 6 of them, and more recently we introduced what we call double down panels. And double down really is for those events that are high paced, high that require really single button pushes for everything. No shifting and or a minimized shifting if possible. So a double down panel actually has extra has extra button rows, so that more of the functionality is under a single button operation. This has become very popular, particularly in sports production. Of course, it's future proof. It's a true UHD switcher. It's just another format selection. You just go to the menu and say, I want 2160p, please. And everything occurs under the hood. It's now, the size changes because obviously the bandwidth is much greater for UHD. So 8 MEs become 4 MEs in UHD, and the keyer count goes from 8 per ME to 4 per ME. But even so, it's still a very powerful UHD switcher at that point. It does have 12 gig connectivity. It also has IP IO options as well. So very powerful, and it will fit an awful lot of, if not all, of everybody's production needs today. Hopefully in the future too. So a quick recap of the picture formats within the production switches. So even the small Solo handles 1080p, Graphite handles up to 1080p, the Carbonite Black series and the Acuity, of course, goes all the way up to 2160p. As far as connectivity is concerned, Solo and Graphite go to 3G SDI, Carbonite Black and Acuity go up to 12 gig SDI, and as far as IP is concerned, well, we can actually put IP on any of the models, but realistically, adding IP to the larger versions makes more practical sense when it comes to cost. So Acuity is the only one that has the ASPEN, specific ASPEN input and output card option. So how do we make these things easier for operational staff, because production switcher, it used to be that a production switcher was almost an island, like all the other bits, the graphics system, VT operations and other things. Today, we really need to be able to consolidate operations and develop a really tightly integrated production solution. So it's not simply I'm operating the production switcher, but what else do I need to operate at the same time when I run a particular event, whether it be on the production switcher or from the graphics system or from any other device. So providing a simple production control environment that's scalable is really essential moving forward. And we believe we have some ways to do that for you. We also need to be able to create perhaps either localized workflows or remote workflows, when we're going to touch on that in a moment, where you can actually capitalize on your investment with centralized equipment and remote camera feeds and so on. So we have solutions to be able to do that too. So rather typically, the switcher seems to sit at the heart of all these bits of gear that are interconnected, and somehow or another we need to tie these all together. We really want to be able to scale the operation staff to the production rather than to the pieces of equipment. And so one of the keys there is our dashboard control system. If you're not familiar with Dashboard is freely downloadable from our website. It will talk to everything that Ross makes, and it also talks to pretty much any third-party device. So it may need some help to do that, but nevertheless we have a really marvelous system here under Dashboard that's been improving with every release, and it's now a wonderful interface, and it's highly customizable. So just a few screenshots of things that we can do with Dashboard. We have dashboard interfaces for all of our standard equipment, and then plus we also can, you can actually, not us, we can do it too for you. We can create custom control interfaces using Dashboard that allow you to tailor the task, the operator's task, to the actual production requirement rather than the equipment's requirement. In other words, if I want to really simplify a particular task and remove the controllability of some things that are unnecessary for that thing, I can build a custom control interface in Dashboard that allows you to do that. As just an example, this one's rather a complex one. This is actually a dashboard interface built by a Ross customer that's, in this case, a church, where they built this interface. It actually controls multiple Carbonites all at once, as well as some of their other playback devices and screens, and it's all touchscreen based in this case. Another customer example is, this is a scoreboard control system for, and you can see it there, it's for Eastern Florida State College. And so this is, again, a custom panel. All of these kinds of panels can be created by yourselves or with help from us to enable you to do very excellent and tailored control of your production. One of the other goals, and we've heard this, we've not just heard it, we've worked with a number of customers that are looking at how do we really capitalize and get the best ROI from our equipment when we are required to do perhaps productions from geographically different locations. Perhaps it's a truck with sports events going back to a central location. Could be a television network with multiple sites. So centralized control with minimal local equipment is one of the examples that we've worked with a number of customers on. So in this particular example, it's a very simple example, obviously highly stylized in this slide. We have some instances where we have customers that send a very simple system to a venue for a sports production. That simple system is includes maybe the switcher frame. In this case, it does. So the actual switcher hardware is there. And this is to minimize the pipeline required to get back to central control. So by minimizing the bandwidth requirements, that can save some money. But so what gets sent back to the central facility is really the multiviewer out of the frame, and the main program feed, maybe a backup feed, plus of course there's networking, bidirectional networking, of course, and intercom. And then in the central control site, all the actual control takes place. So the operators there see the multiviewer from the remote site and have their operational control system there, and actually switch the show in the local site. Another example which works extremely well, we have a number of people doing this at the moment, is centralized equipment, where the equipment is all installed in a large central location. In this particular diagram, well, we have a customer, for example, that has a lot of equipment in their HQ in Chicago, and then they have remote sites around the world. And those remote sites have fairly decent bandwidth pipes between their sites and the central location. They actually send camera feeds back to the central location, and they have control over the centralized equipment in their local location. And so they can produce programming locally, but they're actually using a lot of hardware which is in the central Chicago office. Because they're around the world, they're actually in different time zones, so they can actually share the same equipment resource as they do their productions because of time zone offsets. So it can be very powerful. Now, all of these things are complex, of course, they can be, but we know how to do it, and our switches and the rest of the ROS ecosystem can work together to help you achieve that. So if that's something that is on your list of things to investigate and to do, or something you are doing and need perhaps some further assistance, then we'll be very happy to talk to you about it. So as I said at the beginning of this session, this is really a big top level overview, just looking down at the whole system of where we are today. We believe that we have a very full line of not just production switches, but everything you need for our live production, including software systems for newsrooms, of course, automation, robotics. It's very hard these days to look at ROS and find something that we don't do to help you do your live production. So for more information on any of the products, we've created a landing page for anybody on the webinar. And if you go to that particular link, which is go.rosvideo.com/ps-webinar, that you'll find we've put links there to the switches so that you can get much more detail on the actual features and functions of all the switches. And we will also be putting some of the stuff from the Q&A up there, so you can see all the questions that have come in to this webinar. And what we're going to try and do now is take just a few minutes to look at some of the questions that have come in, pick a couple, because Les has been sitting here typing away, answering questions as they come in. There's a lot, so there's no way we're going to go over all of them verbally just now, but we'll pick a few and answer them for you, so that you all hear the answers. And as I said, we'll post a complete PDF of the questions and answers on the website as soon as we're able, probably in the next day or so. So Les, what do we have?
One of the questions came up about how many multi-viewers in the Carbonite family.
Okay.
That question was answered, but it is something to notice that because of the large range of switchers, that's not a direct answer.
Right.
Right. There's different number depending on the models, so that was answered in the question.
Okay. Well, but to expand on that, so standard Carbonites have 2 multi-viewers, each with 16 windows. And so you got 32 windows total, potentially, of course, lots of different layouts. And then the Carbonite Black series, the Black Plus and the Black Plus 12 6G actually have 5 multi-viewers, each multi-viewer with 16 windows. So you actually can monitor up to 80 sources on a Black Plus frame. What else you got?
So there was a question about software control panels similar to what's in Carbonite Solo and Graphite. Will those be coming to Carbonite?
Excellent, excellent question. So yes, for many of you, if you're familiar with Carbonite, you've seen that we have soft panel control for the Solo and the Graphite systems, and that's been missing from Carbonite to date. I think the end of this week. Is that right, Les? End of this week or early next week?
Or next week. It's all in final PB.
We're going to
a bunch of other features, and that'll get announced when it launches and be posted to the website.
Yeah, so we're going to be releasing 12.4 version of Carbonite. You'll be able to download that and update your machines, and 12.4 will bring with it soft panel control for Carbonite in dashboard. So you'll have virtual panels in dashboard as well. So the same functionality as Solo and Graphite. So hopefully that will be useful.
Question about, is Carbonite Multimedia model, the multimedia model, still available for purchase? If so, what panels are available?
Yeah, well, I mean, so yes, of course it is. And please, if you want one, we're very happy to sell it to you. So the Carbonite Multimedia Frame is the one which actually offers 4 additional HDMI inputs. So it's the only Carbonite above the Solo that has HDMI. And indeed, it's not only available, but as far as panels are concerned, it's a Carbonite. Any Carbonite product, if it's got a Carbonite in the name, it takes any of the Carbonite panels. So it could be the tiny 9-button panel that we use on Solo, all the way up to a 3ME, 32-button panel. Still do the 32.
Yep.
Oh, good.
Yep, that's the 3X. See the Carbonite Black 3X panel.
Yeah.
And vice versa. The smallest Carbonite Solo frame is a Carbonite Black frame. It can connect to any standalone panel, not just the 9-button. You can have any of the panels that also have mnemonics. And since it does have 2 mini MEs, yes, you can hook it up to a 3-row panel so that you can have your main program ME and your 2 mini MEs all accessible at once.
Yeah. So
that would seem a little strange.
Okay.
And expensive. So moving on, there was a question about Expression Live CG with Acuity. That was answered that no, we don't include that because Acuity does not receive the network transfer, but also because in that product space, we find that most customers use full motion graphics channels, and so they're purchasing those anyway.
Right.
There was also a question, there's a bunch more, and I'll continue answering them as we go, even when we come to the end. But one of them was about the I/O, and so the reason why I hadn't answered this one yet was this really needs to be, I guess, addressed, which is Carbonite Black Plus 12G loses a lot of I/O when in UHD mode. 36 inputs down to 9 inputs. Does Acuity lose any I/O when working in UHD? So it's not that it's losing I/O. It needs to use those links in the system to process all of the video. So when that single link 12 gig connection is made, it has to take it down to 4 3 gigabit signals to send it around and then to process it. It gets put back into the UHD raster, gets processed, and then gets put back to 4 3 gig links so that it can move it around inside of the system. With Carbonite, because all of the conversion is being done directly on those I/O boards, that's also why if I connect an HD input, I'm going to have a reduced I/O because it has to convert it to UHD and then split up the signals. Now in Acuity, when I'm using 12 gig single link, an I/O board is 5 inputs because those 5 inputs will also get split up into 4 3 gig links to move around inside of the system. Now, that only applies when your input is UHD. If your input is HD, 1080p, HD, SD, because we do format conversion on the inputs, up to 8 per board, what'll happen is those 4 links become 4 independent HD or 3 gig or SD signals. They then get converted to 1080p and get processed through the system as single links, and then we're able to do the actual conversion to UHD in the ME itself. That way you lose no resources. It uses nothing. It's magic pixie dust. Tastes like maple because we're Canadian. And what happens is we do this inside of the same place that we're doing our color correction and video processing. And we have that per bus in every single ME. So this is why it appears like you don't lose any resources, is because it doesn't take over DVEs and it doesn't require us to give up anything. So when we do that processing, this expands your IO. If I've got 10 UHD cameras, but the rest of my switcher is HD or 3G or SD sources, those don't necessarily have to be converted on the input to UHD. They get handled, passed around inside of the system. So when we say a 30 input UHD switcher, I may have 20 inputs that I set up as single links, and now instead of just 20 additional HD inputs, you've really got 80. Right? So it's a massive IO, depends on what is actually being connected. And especially right now, what we're seeing with a lot of people is as they're operating in UHD, the cameras are UHD, the replay systems are operating in UHD, but a lot of their graphics and ancillary cameras, POV cameras, net cameras, high-speed cameras, those are still HD cameras, and the graphics are all in HD because the graphics packages can't run natively in UHD.
Right.
There was also questions about 1080p, 8ME capability or 4. I addressed that in the conversation, but yes, Acuity switchers, all the specs are always given at 1080p, 5994, 3G capability.
Yep.
There is no loss when you go down to 1.5, and vice versa when you go to 2160. So to go to UHD, the resources go from a 8ME 8 keyer to a 4ME 4 keyer. So essentially 2 MEs go into a split combined mode to give you 4 MEs with 4 keyers in UHD. Okay. There was a question about Rave audio and how many Rave audio boxes.
Oh, cool.
Mentioned 3. That was released with version 1.1, and simply put, we interconnect them the same way we've been interconnecting a single unit. You specify how many you have connected, and then you'll see additional faders magically pop up. So the audio mixer in Rave is a 28 channel stereo audio mixer when you have a single Rave unit. When you add a second Rave unit, it goes to 38 channel, and then when you add the third Rave unit, it jumps up to 48 channel.
Right.
If you're incorporating graphite though with say an Ultrix or other audio processing capabilities, you can also tell the graphite that it is operating in this mode, and it'll give you the faders, and then you're just responsible to shuffle the channels and put them in the appropriate places of the inputs that feed those faders, which is great with Ultrix because you can shuffle any channel to any channel from within the entire system. The audio fabric is massive. So you can bring in audio externally via MADI or audio breakouts or separate SDI connectors, and then inside of the Ultrix, reorder your audio onto the connectors that are going down and into your graphite system.
Okay, cool.
So yes, we have a ton more questions. They keep rolling in. I'm going to continue to answer these questions. Most of the questions I answer when they are a generic question. Obviously, if somebody asks me something specific about themselves, I'm going to reply individually to you. But generally, most of these questions are all being answered to the group. So I'll make sure to answer them all to the group, and then we will be taking all these questions, as Nigel said, and we'll be making it part of the FAQ that'll be going up. That was one of the questions that was asked frequently, was will the webinar be available for download? Will we be able to get access to this later?
Yes.
And yes.
Yeah,
So
the
I'll let
answer
you
is
cover all that.
definitely, yeah, the answer is definitely yes. The only word of warning is that we'll make the webinar available, but there are no notes in it, not really, because we do everything from the seat of our pants here. Sorry about that. Maybe I might get our assistant here, Dan, to see if he can add some notes to it for you before we post it. Is there any? We're now at the end of our time. Is there any last question there that might be useful, or should we just?
That was a pretty good one.
Oh yeah.
From the bottom, it's what is the difference between legacy carbonite and carbonite black, and is carbonite IP compatible with carbonite system?
Okay, so legacy carbonates. Really, the biggest difference is that we looked at when we were looking at what we should do next a few years ago with carbonite. We realized that the demand for a larger I/O was growing in carbonite. People were switching from traditional, much bigger switches and loved the feature set of carbonite and wanted to use carbonite instead because of price point, operational ease, and so on. The problem, of course, was that for many people, 24 inputs wasn't quite enough. So we developed the carbonite black frames based on a new family of FPGAs, the thing we use internally to actually build the switcher, which allowed us to add the additional inputs, the additional 12 inputs to get to 36. So that's the really well, and of course we also were able to expand the output count from 10 to 22 or 25 in case of the Black Plus. So operationally they really are identical, but there is extra horsepower inside of the FPGA in the Carbonite Black series of frames, which allows us to add the third ME. So you can actually do 3 full MEs plus the 4 mini MEs and all the multi-screen and proc amps, color correction, all that stuff inside the black frame. So the operationally, in fact, all of the Carbonite series, all of our switcher series, if you can operate one, you can operate the others. It's very easy to move between them. I'm sorry, what was the last part of that question, Dan?
Is carbonite IP compatible with?
Oh, so yes, so we can install, if you want to adopt some IP, we've got ways to do that. If it's just a small amount of IP connectivity or a hybrid solution, we can definitely help you there. If you want to, surround your existing carbonite with an IP I/O, we have that capability as well. So yeah, just reach out to us and we'll help you out there. Okay. Well, I think hopefully this webinar has been informative. It's been fast, and we've taken as I said, a high-level top-down view. We wanted everybody to be just kept informed of what we're doing with production switches. Very much part of Ross heritage and our passion. Certainly in this group, it's our passion, and we have a lot of stuff in the works for the future. We're looking forward to a very exciting NAB. Any of you that are going, please say hello. We'd love to show you the new stuff, and we will be giving you obviously an update on what we did at NAB after the show in April, together with some more in-depth looks at various ways to deal with signals and so on. So thank you very much for your time today. We realize it's always at a premium, and we appreciate that you gave up as much of it as you did. Thank you very much for attending, and we'll talk soon.